Welcome to the first installment of our journey through the book of Joshua called If God is For Us. We're going to be looking at the book of Joshua as it tells the story of the taking of Canaan, for which God's chosen people was known as the Promised Land. A promise that had been made hundreds of years before to Abraham. Well, actually to Abram. God had promised Abram that he would give his ancestors this land. But in the subsequent years, it had become this long and winding road through captivity and slavery in Egypt and 40 years wandering in the desert just to get them here. But after all of this time, God's promises about a land to call their own were about to be fulfilled. They just needed to go take the land. And today, we're going to be looking at the first 9 verses of Joshua chapter 1. All God's chosen people needed to do was just to go take the land. They were ready to go take the land. But because of something that happened earlier, Moses, who had been leading the people, was not allowed to enter the promised land. And so as the people were preparing to go and take this land, to conquer this land, their leader, since God had led them from Egypt, dies. Moses dies. And so there's this transfer of leadership that takes place between Moses and Moses' second, Joshua. Everything suddenly changed. You see, Moses just wasn't their leader. He wasn't just their military captain. He wasn't just the guy in charge. But Moses acted essentially as a go-between the people and God. You see, God spoke to Moses, and then Moses spoke to the people. But the inverse of that as well. Moses spoke to the people, and then Moses spoke to God. There's even one point in Numbers chapter 14 where Moses even appears to change God's mind. Now, that's a deep dive for another day, and we're not going to get into that today. But all of this is to say that Moses was central to so much of life for the Israelites. And now he was gone. And Joshua is given this mantle of leadership, the responsibility of being that central figure in so much of life. And so at the beginning of Joshua, we see Joshua's call to lead the people. And God reaffirming his commitment to Joshua and to the people. Now, one thing that I think becomes pretty apparent when you read the first few verses of Joshua is that perhaps Joshua was a little insecure about his role. The verses don't directly say that, but in the first 9 verses, there are 7 calls to be strong and courageous, or promises that God makes about his faithfulness, and or how God is promising them success, or that he would never leave them. God was calling Joshua to do something and was promising him success, but Joshua was going to need help, God's help. Sometimes in our lives, God's call on our lives, in fact, a lot of the time, God's call on our lives is something bigger than the things that we can do on our own. God says, I need you to do this, whatever it is, but you can't do it. You're going to need me. God says we're going to need him to do these things. I'm going to share a story with you from my own life where I learned this lesson. A story you may have never heard, but one of the times where God in my life was calling me to something bigger than me, where I was going to need him to be a success, was when I was actually stepping into this role, the role of the lead campus pastor here at Cornerstone Airdrie. I was very insecure about my abilities to lead and believed that I needed help. I felt God calling me to trust him, but really believed at the same time that I needed help. So I prayed, and I prayed, and I prayed. And really and truly in my heart, I believe that God had given me some people to talk to about coming to help me and be a part of our church here and help me lead and help me build this church into what I believed it could be. And I believe that God had heard my prayer, and I was so relieved because I believed he had answered my prayer. It was 2 couples and one single person. And so I met with them, spending hours sharing my vision and my heart. I met with people in their house for hours, at our house for hours. And each time I met with someone, they would say the same thing. We'll pray about it. But I felt so confident in their answer because I knew that God had given me them as someone to talk to. And so over the coming days and weeks, they all came back to me one by one. Hey, Brad, we prayed about it. And I don't think that now is the time for us. I prayed about it, and I think that God is not calling me to do that right now. Maybe later, but not right now. Each one got back to me, and each one said no. I was so confused because I knew that God had heard my prayers, and I believed that He had answered them. I believed I needed help. And God had given me some people, some names of people who would have been spectacular. They were the answer to my prayer. And they all said no. And so after some confusion and hurt and frustration with God, I went back to God. I said, God, what happened? You called me to this. I prayed and you gave me their names and they all said no. God, what is happening? And God spoke to me, and this is what he said to me. This is what He told me. He said, you thought you needed help. You thought you needed people like them, and you weren't listening to me. So I led you to them because I knew that they would listen to me. And then you would have to hear me. But what you really need is you really need me. You don't need people, Brad. You need me. And I will work in the people, and I will bring you the right people. My insecurities and my fears were pushing me away from a reliance on God and putting my trust in what I thought I needed. But as people of God, our hope is not found in ourselves or what we can do. We can place our hope there. We can do that. And we often do choose to place our hope where we can find it, where we think it's safest, where we think is the best. But no matter how firmly we place our hope there, listen, we will never find hope there. Our hope is only found in God and His faithfulness in our lives. For Joshua, his path to doing what God had called him to do, his path to success, was only through one path. It wasn't strategy. It wasn't through military might. It wasn't through cunning or charisma or anything other leaders would rely on. His only path to doing what God had called him to do was through God. Starting in verse 7, God makes this promise to Joshua. He says, be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave to you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you would be successful wherever you go. Keep the book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. God's promise to Joshua was that if Joshua made a point of placing his trust and putting God first in everything he did, then he would be successful in conquering the obstacle in front of him, the promised land. And God wants to say the same thing to you today. Be strong and courageous. We are living in scary times right now. I know every time I cough or I hear one of my kids or my wife cough, chills run down my spine. But God's promises to Joshua are the same for us today. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. God is going to walk with us and walk through these times with us. God is with you right now. I want to close session 1 with Psalm chapter 20. I want this to serve as a prayer for you and for your house, a prayer for you in this time, a word of encouragement as we walk through these times and remember where to place your hope when you can't find a place on your own. Psalm chapter 20 says this: May the Lord answer you when you are in distress. May the Lord, the God of Jacob, protect you. May he send you help from the sanctuary. May he grant you support from Zion. May he remember all your sacrifices and accept your burnt offerings. May he give you the desire of your heart and make all your plans succeed. May we shout for joy over your victory and lift up our banners in the name of our God. May the Lord grant all your requests. Now this I know: the Lord gives victory to his anointed. He answers them from his heavenly sanctuary with the victorious power of his right hand. Some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. They are brought to their knees and fall, but we rise up and stand firm. Lord, give victory to the King. Answer us when we call. That's session 1 of If God is For Us, as we look at the book of Joshua. On this page, on our webpage, you will find some discussion questions for you to work through to take this text and what we talked about today and really dig deeper into it and to apply it to our lives. I want to encourage you to take some time over the next day or two to read Joshua chapter 1, verses 1 through 9, and to work through these discussion questions. I would encourage you to work through them inside of your family, with your spouse, with your kids, if you feel that's appropriate. Or even bigger than that, maybe give somebody a call. Maybe give somebody in the church a call and say, hey, did you see session 1? Can we talk through some of this stuff? If you would like to talk through any of this stuff with me, you can always reach me through Facebook or through our website. My contact information is all there. I'd be happy to spend some time talking with you and chatting with you, be it about session 1 or really about anything. If you need to talk to your pastor, I am here. Over the next little while, we're going to be reaching out to everybody and doing our best to be in contact. But if you need something from me right now, know that I'm here for you. I love you so much. I'm really excited for this journey as we see what it means that God is fighting for us. I love you, and I will see you again real soon.